the Fulham game, it's massive for Chelsea to get back on track in the Premier League after a difficult month, December, despite the good start. I think, wasn't it Sevilla was just at the start of December. We beat them 4-0. And then, of course, we beat Leeds in one of our best performances of the season. But it went downhill from there. The defeats to Everton, Wolves, Arsenal and Man City. We've had that victory against Morecambe, but now going in against Fulham, who are in some decent form themselves. You know, they've improved from their start to the year where they look really shambolic. What are sort of your feelings going into this game? Because number one, we can't take Fulham for granted. They have improved under Scott Parker. They seem a lot more structured now. Luckily, Ruben isn't going to be playing against us as a lone player, but on top of that, the formation, the tactics, in terms of getting back to a fluid style of play, what do you think Lampard should be looking for this game?
I think just maintaining the same things we saw in the previous game, because I think we've kind of seen a lot of those elements during that 17-game unbeaten run where, I mean, the amount of improvement we saw in our ability to score from set pieces, defend from set pieces, you know, stop teams scoring on the counter-attack, limiting teams' opportunities in front of goal, you know, and then the game management side where we were able to score the first goal, control the game, and then play on the counter-attack second half. And I think that's one thing that all the big teams kind of do. And I think to get that consistency, just like completely that pattern and completely that mastered, is going to take some time. With Fulham, of course, you know, their form has been good, but you know, I think they've drawn their past 4 or 5 games. Yeah, they haven't lost, but then they're not really scoring any goals. And you know, their counter-attacking threat isn't the highest at all times. So I do think that against Fulham, because we're not Spurs, you know, we have players, you know, we like to play attacking football, you know, we aren't gonna, and Lampard will make subs unlike Mourinho. I feel like this is an opportunity to translate the last win, get the confidence up again. I feel now we've got all our players back and fit. I think that is the key thing. You know, you've got a fully fit Pulisic, you've got a fully fit Hudson, Ziyech. Kai is moving a lot better than what he was doing during December, and is adding that goal threat and actually, you know, creating for the team and providing that, you know, responsibility for the team too. And I just think that once those elements click, Werner should be able to score. And I think, yeah, Fulham will be a good game. But again, of course, that's not the only one I'm looking at. Me personally, it's not a massive must-win game, because if we do beat Fulham, then the next game becomes a massive must-win game, and then every game is a massive must-win game, and it never stops, to be honest. So, yeah, I think Fulham, a team like that, it's a good opportunity to play them right now with what we have, especially when they're going to be tired after, you know, they got to play 2 games in like 1 week against Spurs and Chelsea. So, yeah, I'm not expecting them to be able to, you know, mount that challenge against 2 big teams, to be honest.
What do you think has been the big issue for Chelsea over the past month? Because a lot of people have been trying to dive into what's gone wrong after such a strong period under Lampard, being unbeaten and seeing those good performances. I think some of it naturally comes down to maybe injuries and players going off form, maybe tactically as well. What have you seen within our sort of style of play that were working before this run that have really deteriorated over the past month?
I think the key one was when we lost Pulisic, Ziyech and Hudson just like straight away. This meant that we had to play Havertz, who clearly would not have played if these guys were fit, because, you know, he just recovered from COVID. And I think when people hear COVID, they forget that it means that, you know, it's a respiratory disease. It's going to affect like your lungs. And obviously when you're a football player, that kind of needs to have your lungs on point if you're running in this Premier League too. It's no surprise why you're going to struggle. And you know, he was forced to play, and there's so many elements like that behind why the form went down. So for me, there's not any one reason, but I guess my major criticism, I'd say, in the period was the overzealousness. I think that game against Leeds will forever stand out to me. There's a reason why no other team had to outrun Leeds to beat them. I don't know why we had to do that at home, especially when we were how many goals up to, and in a period like December, where you know the stamina doesn't just replenish in the next game. You know, you're still feeling it from the previous game. I feel it was no surprise why we saw so much slow play and slow movement, and you know, minus the players that make the movement happen, minus the players that can find players that make movement. What you're left with is, you know, a team that doesn't really reflect us, in my personal opinion. And of course, it was some frustrating losses, but again, they were like the fine details in the end. It wasn't like last season where, we really, really lost. I think it was more a case of just not having enough in the locker, not having enough movement and stuff. And yeah, I just think that's honestly it was just a process of having to just ride this period out, and hopefully just continue on once these guys get back.
Just to challenge you on that in terms of finer details, because I think about the Everton and Wolves games, obviously, and I think we underestimate how massive a knockback that was to this team. Like, in a 4-day period, we've gone from being unbeaten in like 16, 17 games to losing 2 games, and the manner of the Wolves defeat as well, losing it in the last seconds, despite us thinking about the quality of players we have, mentally that's going to absolutely do you in. It's gonna hurt you so much. Like, even a player like Thiago Silva we saw after that game, really hurting. And it's I think mentally sometimes we look at players and we look at them in sort of the FIFA sense of they're going to be ready the next game, and clearly that hurt Chelsea. Even though we won against West Ham, you could see that wasn't the best performance. I think we got a little bit fortunate that night that West Ham weren't really as creative in front of goal, and we sort of relied on the counter once again. But that Arsenal game for me, and parts of that City first half, were quite concerning. And questions about the manager recently have sort of stemmed from those 2 performances. Does it concern you that we're having those type of performances in a short space of time, or do you think now, maybe with the team being, or the squad, being fully fit again and a little bit more rest, we'll see less of those performances?
I think we are going to see less. I think that during the periods, I think one game that really reflects my stance of the team were those 2 games against Sevilla. The first game at home against them, I felt like they looked like, of course, Sevilla are an incredible football team, but they looked too good on the night in terms of how they were moving the ball and playing. And I think they let me just even find quickly what the team was.
I think it was a 4-2-3-1. It was, Frank was still playing a 4-2. I think Georgie and Kante was the base of midfield. It was like a couple of days after that Southampton 3-3 draw, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think that exactly was the case. And we're not trying to be a team that is going to use a 4-2-3-1 in that manner without having a profile of certain players to make that happen. And knowing that team, Mount, Havertz, Pulisic, Werner, George, Kante. You look at the players on the team sheet, but that doesn't translate to how they're going to play. There's 2 important things in football: strategy and tactics. Strategy is the manner in which you're going to, what's the game plan behind how you're going to win the game. And then tactics is about all those little details behind how you can make the strategy work. You know what I mean? So, come on. Mount was never going to be playing left wing in a 4-2-3-1 throughout this season. Jorginho, of course, but we're not going to see him in a 4-2-3-1 as well. And then when you fast forward to that 4-0 win, which obviously reflects what Lampard really wants to do with the team, how he played, 4-3-3. We saw 2 wingers playing. We saw 3 midfield as well. George and Cover. There was a lot better balance. There was a lot better, quality with how he played. And it was no surprise why we were able to translate that and get such a deserved win against Sevilla on the night. So I kind of feel like December kind of is like the metaphor for those 2 games as well. And now that we're out the period, now these guys are back, now they're fit and the confidence is there too. There's just good vibes happening right now. I think we're going to push on again and get some more wins under our belt.
I want to talk to you about the sort of constructing the best attack, because that's something that has been questioned as well over this period. And as we say about that sort of the squad being fully fit again, and looking at those players and thinking about whether it's a 4-2-3-1 or mainly probably going to be a 4-3-3, and what is the best 3 players to put in attack for Chelsea in this game. I think Olivier Giroud is an interesting one to talk about, because Giroud has done so well this season. He's Chelsea's top goal scorer, and I don't think many people would have predicted that back in August. I think it shows you sort of what he's done consistently under Lampard. I'm a bit torn about what Lampard's going to do in front of goal tomorrow in terms of, on Saturday, of who he plays instead of, whether it's Timo Werner or whether it's Olivier Giroud, because playing Werner against Morecambe to me was a sign that maybe he was preparing that team for the game against Fulham, trying to get Timo's confidence back up. But there is an argument with Olivier Giroud's form, and if we're coming up against a tired Fulham side who are likely going to sit deep, would you rather have Giroud up there instead of Timo?
I think I would probably have to go for Timo, not because of I'm thinking about favoritism in players and stuff, but just more like the bigger picture behind the tactics, because we know against Fulham they're going to come to sit deep, low blocks, pack the middle, which they've been doing this entire month, and that's how they've been drawing every single game. We need to learn how to break teams down with the signings that we've had, with that way we're trying to break teams down, the movement in behind, creating the space between the lines, creating opportunities to break the lines, can't stop, because that's what you kind of have to do against these teams that just, they don't give you any space to play in, and football's become dominated recently by teams who, for me, the way that how possession of the ball is just completely dropped over the past 10 years. I remember back in the day when I was watching football, defensive teams used to have between 35 to 40% possession. Now, you're seeing teams playing with as little as 20%, 25%, which is crazy in my opinion. But it's how the game is, and I think we have to learn how to break down teams like this. And if we use that game as an opportunity to revert to something different, how do we build that momentum to consistently find ways to break down opposition like this? So I think Giroud is an interesting one, very interesting, because I think Lampard's realised if you want to use Giroud, you have to use two classic wingers in that sense, either side, because Giroud's a guy, he's like your out-and-out striker where you feed him and he scores. And that's really what he does. He stays in the middle, he looks for the opportunities, you play the ball towards him, and the guy's an excellent finisher. But I just think, as we saw during December, times when Werner had to play alongside him, the chemistry wasn't really there because Giroud's kind of occupying the spaces that, Werner's supposed to be making those late arrivals in from the wide position. So there's all these little details that, it's impossible for a manager to just have the foresight to know what's going to go wrong. You have to kind of see how it goes sometimes to learn from it and make it happen. And I think Lampard has done that. And that's why when Giroud plays, you normally see Hudson and Pulisic either sides. And I just think, obviously, we don't need that right now that we have all these guys back, now that Ziyech's back, now that Kai is looking good. It's about getting these guys up now. So I'd maintain the same type of principle, the same team. I'd like to see Hudson, Werner and Ziyech up front and just keep doing that, man.
Hudson-Odoi's ability, I think, to sort of be quite flexible and versatile in sense that he can. I know you did a video on this the other day about sort of breaking down Chelsea's performances and the performance against Morecambe, and specifically Hudson-Odoi's performance of, I like the ability that he can run in behind. He's got that pace to do that, but he also likes to drop deep and sort of can construct play from deep as well, setting up Mason Mount and in the second half making a run in behind. Shows you both sides of his game there. Yeah. For me, I think it'd be a bit criminal if Lampard doesn't start him in his game, because I think he's done all he could to get into this team. But then beyond that, you think about Leicester, who are likely going to play a higher line. You're thinking about Werner running in behind there, and that could be a good game for him. The same with Pulisic as well. It's just, it's tough to keep, it's the balancing act of being a manager, right, with all these players. It's tough to keep these players happy. And do you think there could be an issue of Lampard switching those players in and out when we've got a lot of games, and then that chemistry that you want to get into this team could be disrupted again?
It depends on some of the players who obviously, I think there's key ones that get the system working. So I think if anything happens to guys like Ziyech, Kai, maybe the fullbacks too, it does mean that you play differently. And, I look at our attack, I'm happy with the attack. I look at guys like Werner and Pulisic. For me, they're like the goal scoring inside forwards. It's every attacking player brings their own different quality. And with how we play, about freeing spaces up left for these guys, I think it suits them really well. So it's nice that we can have players that suit the system that can also provide something different when they have to be used. Hudson-Odoi's always been a 2-in-1 player. We've all known that. It's surprising that, for me, that a lot of people are just noticing that, he's always been this 2-in-1 guy that has the playmaking and has the goal scoring. And it's about, he's on the same type of, not level, but stylistically similar to your Neymars, your Hazards, your Jack Grealishes, guys that, they score, take responsibility, but also create as well. And, I like how Callum can even do something different and play as an actual classic winger on the right-hand side, where he can just use his creativity with his crossing and long balls to help. So I think from an attacking sense, the only one that maybe doesn't complement things as much is actually Giroud, because you really have to change how you play completely to use him, which is interesting. But I think for me, what the future I've always felt is going to be is that there'll be a time where, when it comes to who's the consistent first team, it won't really be a thing anymore, because, it'll be about using the best team for the right occasion. And I know this is a complete different tangent, but, I'm sure you've seen all the reports of a Nagelsmann being linked and how there's a lot of excitement behind what he could do. I mean, I get it, Bundesliga, counter pressing, Werner, Pulisic, Kai, it makes sense, but this guy's also historically known for constantly rotating teams and using different teams with different opposition and using so many different formations, like 5 to 7 a season. So I kind of feel like that is what the future of the game is now with these young guys. And I think this is why I'm excited by our squad, is because it is kind of future proof in the sense that if anything happens to Frank, someone can come in and continue and develop it more,
Yeah, I just want to talk about Pulisic because I know a lot of people get annoyed about spamming crosses and it sort of being the only way we play. I think when Pulisic is in a team, I think we find it easier to get through central areas because I think that guy naturally drifts inwards. I look at, say, the West Ham game and other games as well. Pulisic, if you start him on the left, and Aston Villa as well was another game where we had a few chances early on that Pulisic probably should have been more clinical with. I think he would have scored those at the back end of last season. Once again, that didn't come from a cross out wide. It was him making a run in behind the defence and penetrating the space that was there, because I think he's got amazing anticipation. I have said this when I've been asked questions about why we cross. I think it's just obvious when you've got two crossers of the ball like Hakim Ziyech and Reece James, why don't you want to utilise them? I don't understand why you wouldn't. If I was the coach of Chelsea, which I wouldn't really want the job, to be honest, because I don't think I do very well at it. But if I was looking at the squad at the start of the season, I'd go, yeah, that's an area we want to capitalise on. I think it's a bit harsh on Frank to have a go at him for utilising Reece and Ziyech. If they're not both in the team, then I understand that, right? But when they are in the team, you can't ever go at him for utilising both of those players.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think we've got world-class crosses of the ball in Hudson, in Ziyech, in Reece. Got so much quality that you would use that. And I think when I read those criticisms, I never really agree with it, because I personally feel like it comes from analysing from isolation. And I think with a lot of takes you read, it's centered around the idea of only judging off the club instead of seeing what other clubs are doing across Europe and in our very own league. I mean, when you look at the crossing stats, it's not like we've played 200 more crosses in the next team. That's going to vary as the season goes on. I felt we tended to cross more during that period because we just weren't playing well. Confidence was down, players unfit, players out of form. It's natural that things become one-dimensional during periods like that. But I think for me, when I look at teams like Bayern, and I mean, they kind of cross a lot too. They kind of spread the play a lot and look to play really direct. Liverpool, I think they've always done that as well. Hence why Trent Arnold has so many assists. But I guess as long as you score from them, then it's okay. And as you said with Pulisic, a lot of times we've created those chances, they don't get scored, and you kind of forget the details behind how that chance even came about in the first place. So I'm hearing what people are saying, but for me, it goes down to the difference between strategy and tactics. So the strategy is how we use those wide areas to create the spaces, because, I mean, you have to. I've read a lot of comments about playing in the middle, forcing it in the middle, and of course that happens when the space is open, and then we do. I mean, we've created a lot of goals in the counter attack and a lot of goals this season through how we play in the middle. But you kind of have to get that first goal first to be able to open the game up, to be able to play differently. And I think when once the season ends and we've got our targets, people's opinions will be completely different looking back on the season compared to being involved in it now. And I don't know, I think personally just focusing too much on the negatives as if that paints the only picture, when it's just not that accurate, to be honest.
It does come down to that in terms of what works and what doesn't. I think if you're putting crosses into the box, like if Ziyech starts against Fulham, puts in 3 crosses and we score from all 3 of them, everyone will be, gassing up how amazing of a crosser he is. And Reece, whenever Reece puts in a cross in it and we put it in the back of the net, people get really hyped about it, right? And there's a reason why. I think you just spoke about defensive teams, right, of how they sit in, and it's very hard, as we know naturally, unless you score very early in a game. If a team's congested in the middle and is sitting so deep, what are you supposed? Are you just supposed to run in straight lines and then lose the ball easily and be overcrowded? Fans will get frustrated about that as well. So we talk about sort of flexibility and versatility in this squad of ways to attack, and I don't think that that's a negative if you've got players of that ability to just unlock a defence, as we've seen in earlier parts of the year with Ziyech. So I think absolutely utilising him a bit more, I think it is massive for Chelsea. Just your predictions for the Fulham game in terms of maybe score, but also goal scorers, key players that you think could help Chelsea win the game.
I think playing against Fulham, especially when they've got so many big games in such a short amount of time, I think we could capitalise on that. I think maybe 3-4-0 is what I'm thinking. And I'm sure maybe once that game's over, it's going to be, well, it was only Fulham and, they just played a game against Spurs. And then all talks of it being a massive must-win game will become, negligent once that game's over. So, I see 3 or 4 goals against Fulham.
That'd be a pretty convincing win, especially with Chelsea's recent difficulties. I hope that won't be the case, because it should be seen as a positive moment for Chelsea, especially going into a really difficult away trip to Leicester. It's a very difficult game. So I think hopefully it will just be able to give us more confidence. I think, it is going to be a lot of Chelsea trying to break Fulham down. In these games, it's always about that first goal. And I think if Chelsea do get an early goal, especially against a Fulham team who are going to have to rotate their team, there's no way they're going to play the same 11 again in probably a 3-5-2 formation, sitting quite deep. I think it could be a very prosperous day for Chelsea. But as we've seen recently, if we overcommit men, if some of the key players don't turn up, it's going to be a very difficult day, I'm sure, once again. But thank you so much, Nini, for joining me today for another great discussion. As I do with all my guests, chance for you to shout out where people can find your work online. I know you've got a Kai Havertz video coming out soon, where the German Ghost, I think it's titled, and where you're going to be sort of delving into his game. So any other content as well, shout it out now.
Yeah. I want to do a video on Havertz. I think there's been a misconception behind how he's being played. I think there's a difference between being in a deeper position and, being involved in the play from deep positions, and being in a deep position where you're kind of just, unmarked. No one can find you. So when you're moving into the books, you're going unopposed because your position was so deep. You got the anticipation, you got the legs, you know how to time your runs inside the books. I kind of feel like it's going to be it's kind of like a unorthodox number 10 role, kind of like a false 9. Books. I don't know, but I just think I've seen some elements behind how I like it. I've seen some of the little patterns too behind how we saw Ziyech finding him far post. It's not the first time Kai's been able to assist from being in positions like that. I just think that it's going to be quite exciting to see how that develops and how that goes on, to be honest.
Absolutely, man. And all of links to Nini's work, as ever, are in the description box below. His Twitter, his YouTube. Make sure you go and sub to his channel. Some amazing content, really in-depth content as well in terms of style of play, in terms of player performances. So go and check it out. Subscribe to his channel. I'm sure most of you are. But thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. And I'll see you again.